Quick and all on format. I figured we just go through, do some intros, do like the panel for 20, 30, 40-ish minutes, and also take some questions from the audience if that pops up. Okay, let's get started. All right, hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the LlamaIndex webinar series. Today, super excited to have some leading AI educators and content creators join us for a panel discussion on LLM challenges in production. Featuring Mayo, Oshin, Jason, and also Dylan from Starmorph.ai. So all of these, everyone here today has a huge following and has basically inspired a lot of different developers to help start building LLM applications. So they've seen a lot of different use cases. So I'm super excited to ask a lot of these questions about understanding some of these use cases and really understanding what are some of the most salient pain points that users are facing today. And also discuss and bounce around ideas on how to fix some of these issues either today or also long-term, the tooling that we would need to build to help solve some of this. So without further ado, let's get started. And maybe we can start with some intros. And I'll pass it over to you, Mayo.
Yeah, my name is Mayo. I was an early contributor to LangChain. It's quite influential in pushing out LangChain in the early stages in terms of the chat with data movement. So far, I've reached 3.5 million people through my content this year. Yeah, so since then, I've kind of branched out to start my own consulting, AI consulting company. And, being fortunate to do a combination of training and development with different enterprises, worked with leaders at BCG, PwC, University of Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's been very interesting to see the challenges actual businesses have with integrating AI versus just demos that we see on Twitter. So looking forward to this conversation.
Great. One sec. Passing it over to you, Jason.
Yeah, hi guys, everyone. My name is Jason, and my background is actually a product designer and product manager. So I'm probably the least technical here, but I started getting into AI development and large language development end of last year. And also in the meantime, start document about the interesting project I'm building. That's how I started a YouTube channel a couple months ago called AI Jason. So in the meantime, I also doing some consulting business on the side as well, where there are a lot of requirement from SMB and also business that they want to do some internal automation through AI as well. And recently, I also joined a company here called Relevance AI, where we are building a no-code platform to enable people to build AI automation and agents. So very keen to discuss those challenges we face with you.
Sweet. Jason's also joining us from Australia, I think, and it's 2 a.m. where you are. So really appreciate you taking the time to come speak with us. Passing it to you, Dylan.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan. My background is in graphic design, product design, and front-end development mostly. And I always like to play with kind of new experimental technologies. And when I saw that ML and AI was kind of weaving into web development, I got really excited and just started experimenting, made some YouTube videos of different repos. And yeah, it's been really growing into, a lot of people have a huge level of excitement with all of the new capabilities. So just been building with a lot of small businesses and kind of collaborating and helping integrate the AI into the platforms they already have. And Jerry, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
Great. Well, let's kick it over to the questions. So just to start with, what are some of the biggest use cases that you're seeing today? I think these days, a lot of both developers and also companies are building different types of LLM-based applications, but we see a variety of different use cases and also a spectrum of complexity from simple to kind of more complex and autonomous. So structured data extraction, summarization, conversational chatbots, autonomous agents. Passing it over to you guys, what are some of the biggest use cases that you're seeing? And maybe we can start with Dylan.
Sure. I would say it's definitely evolving. And of course, the space is changing really quickly. And there's so much great content and frameworks coming out that I think almost every week there's a different thing that people are, really interested in exploring and kind of pushing the frontier on. But in general, I would say that RAG is definitely a really common thing that small businesses are interested in integrating. And I think agents, people, in my experience, find very conceptually interesting. And I'm definitely bullish on it long term, but I haven't seen it being used as much personally as RAG method so far.
Got it. Jason.
Yeah. So there are a lot of use case, and I think the hard part is figure out what are the real deal versus the ones that people are playing with and might not consistent. So the ones I try to see is what are the use. So I have different people and team try to build the solutions. The ones that I see people actually have high retention and continue using it are kind of two so far. One is data classifying and categorization. For example, if you are a support team or research department for consumer products, they normally have huge amount of feedback they need to categorize, which is normally done manually by people. So the large language model is really great at just helping them categorizing all those data at scale very easily. And on the other side, it's not just for research and support. I'm also surprising to see almost one use case every single venture capitalist needs is like categorizing startups as well. So I was helping a few VC, almost every VC, they need to have receive hundreds of startups every week and month where they need to categorize whether these are right the category of startup for them to focus on, because data is often outdated. So data classifying and categorizing seem to be one big one. But apart from that, there's also a lot of use cases regarding the those kind of hyper personalized content generation, because of this structured data extraction and summarization capability, they can actually set up very great automation flow. For example, a recruiting agency, they can upload a resume of people, extract core information, compare with the relevant job posting, write a very hyper personalized email to the hiring manager why this person is a great fit, things like that. So these two use cases I see are actually people using it continuously. But apart from that, there are, like Dylan mentioned, not retrieval is a quite big use case. But it's also really hard because everyone has simple mindsets as I just want to run GPT on my files, but it's never that easy. And I also have a question is like, for those use case, do they actually got end user adoption a lot? Because I know I totally understand it, but does end user actually use it is the question I do have. But apart from that, the one I personally most interested is like AI autonomous agents. And as Dylan also mentioned, there are a lot of challenges there, but it really changed the value population once it actually achieved the quality bar. The two big part I face with, one is like, how can I get the agent to actually follow the instruction I give, especially in terms of can it ask for human input when it knows when it should. I found that's really hard. And also, how can I dictate it to do things that he thinks he can do without those tools? Especially like knowledge retrieval is one of them, or content generation. Right. Without fixing those two, I found it very hard.
Is the agent use case a use case that you want to see happen, or something you're seeing happen across like different companies that you're working with?
Yeah, so I actually have a few people who want to build, for example, for the content generation as example. For now, what they do is they have kind of linear workflow, just to they putting some contents in and then generate something out. But ideally, is they will want to have a almost AI marketing intern where you can just do the research about what's the trending topic for my industry, do the research, generate content, but without the agent actually follow the specific rules or workflow, and also without it to actually ask for human input properly, the result is just not there. So I see the use case, but if those two things are fixed.
I see. Makes sense. And passing it over to you, Mayo.
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I come across more, I'd say, traditional industries kind of reach out to me, I'd say. I don't have and so most of the use cases they're interested in, it's optimizing the existing divisions they have. So we're talking about customer support, sales and marketing, HR, which he just mentioned. That's actually a use case I've come across in terms of just personalizing the recruitment process. And I'd highlight that word. I'd say that's really one of the things they're looking for is personalization. Um, and personalization because of just the fact that it's higher conversion rates, because the business doesn't really, they don't really care about the technicalities in terms of, oh, it's an agent or whatever. They just care about the business outcome. And so from their point of view, I'm seeing basically things they would usually hire people for, but then they're looking to automate that with AI. So, for example, how do we, use natural language to extract information from our database, right? That's something that there would be, actually I've seen quite high demand for. There's obviously the chat with the documents thing. It's still of interest, but I noticed with companies, actual SMBs and enterprises, or medium-sized businesses, they don't just want to chat with their documents. They want to have an integrated solution. So they want to not only extract information from the documents they have, but also their database, and also maybe they've got a CRM, right? And it's this kind of combination that I see that there's a lot of work to do in terms of solutions. I saw the CEO of Vercel put out a post recently about how do we the challenge of combining RAG with kind of tapping into the database. Those are two different approaches. And then, Jerry, you've also put out stuff in fine tuning. So I think it's the question really from a lot of companies, the use cases are designed to replace people or to optimize the existing processes through tapping into the APIs, database, existing documents. Sometimes they have multimedia stuff as well. And then CRMs, that's a big thing too, a lot of companies have. So I think from that lens, that's the way they're looking at it. How can we, improve our sales and marketing from 10% conversion to 20%? How do we, save costs and recruitment? That is going to be a big, I think, moving forward for AI to kind of break into society beyond the first wave. We kind of need to figure out the marketing angle of how we position things, because just saying agents, that doesn't mean anything to them. But when you say this is going to help you, double your revenue or your bottom line or whatever, then they're more interested in what we have to say.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you bring up a few points, one of which is basically this idea that in the end, businesses just care about like improving business outcome or improving efficiency, reducing cost. And so how do you position the use cases? That doesn't matter if it's RAG or agents towards actually solving some of those. And in terms of like use cases, we've mentioned like there's like classification to RAG to agents to kind of like personalization. So it's great to get a spectrum of these use cases that you guys have brought up. Maybe shifting gears a little bit. Now, given some of these use cases and given some of the people they've worked with, let's talk about like the core of what the webinar is about today, which is like challenges, right? Like challenges in developing these applications today, in both the prototype experimentation phase and also as you try to iterate and try to productionize some of these apps. And so for you personally, as well as like some of the clients and customers that you've talked to, what are some of the biggest pain points that you're seeing in LLM development, whether you face them personally or have seen others face? And obviously, there's like a long laundry list of kind of like different categories of pain points. But just to name a few as examples, like there's everything that I've heard from hallucination, inaccuracy, like just lack of like principled knowledge to like difficulty getting human labels, the scalability, cost, latency, security, and much more. And so maybe we could start with Jason.
Yeah, definitely. So one big problem I actually face is exactly what Mayo mentioned, is for knowledge retrieval. They often don't just want to retrieve one type of data. It's multiple types of data. It's from the, if this use case is simple as help doc website, it's fine. But they normally have a mix of the help doc website to a lot of PDF. And inside of PDF, it also have a bunch of other different type of data inside the PDF, like images, diagram, charts, and it just failed at the very beginning in terms of data extraction. There's no very clear good solution at that point. And then when we move down to the data extraction part, they're also quite a bit challenging in terms of retrieval, because even though we get those data out properly, there are literally different ways of retrieval for different type of data. If the CSV data, it won't work with the normal vector database. And for certain type of questions, vector search is just not answer. Keyword search actually works better. So with all those complexities in terms of the end user questions versus what we prepare at the beginning, that's quite a huge gap here as well to get RAG really work well. And apart from that, also the agent use case I'm personally very interested about, but I just couldn't. It's very hard to control the agent behavior at the moment. Would be pretty keen to hear other people if you guys explore that agent behavior control. If you got any success in terms of getting it, ask people's input, ask user input. That would be that's also a very big problem I face with too.
Sweet. I know we're talking about like kind of tips and tricks in just a bit. But what's like the like you mentioned like CSV files, like how do you process CSV files? Maybe just really quickly.
That's like when you just think about CSV file, it also have multiple different scenario. Like if I want to create a few short prompts, let's say the use case I was helping the other day is they want to create a knowledge base about the best practice in terms of customer support. So they want to create their CSV file is this is a list of a customer email I received, and this is the best practice answer. So for them, it's like you need to create this database, but where you have two columns, but in terms of the query and the retrieval, you actually just want to search for the customer email, because there's quite big difference in terms of a customer saying, I love your product versus a prospect saying, I love your product. It can be very different scenario. So for that, you have a specific type of setup. But if it's other type of data, like the financial reports, then it's you need to set up properly that it needs to know that metadata of this one is financial report. So the retrieval methods need to be different. Like you were do more kind of code interpreted way, use a traditional SQL or get it to write Python code to do the retrieval. So there's no clear answer I found, and that's actually the hardest part. And the only solution I found so far is you kind of have an agent layer there to almost like classify the question and decide what are the database and what's the retrieval methods it can use, and then do retrieval. But the problem there is also you need to define, make a trade-off between the latency versus quality.
Got it. Mayo, passing it to you.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the obvious ones, hallucination, latency, I would say the biggest issue from a development point of view is just the decision tree of choices is just so much. Like it's like, you've got so many knobs you can turn, and for each knob, it's a different outcome. So for example, what if you're going to go down RAG, what chunk size do you use? How do you split? What vector are you going to use? What method of retrieval are you going to use? Metadata filtering. And then you have the whole discussion of, well, the data structure of the metadata attached to the embeddings, right? What does that look like ahead of time? I've had situations where we've built our solution for the client only to realize that we had the wrong data structure for the metadata. Then we had to go back and do the embeddings from scratch. So I'd say the whole, thinking about the optimal variables or the optimal parameters to get the outcome you're looking for is definitely a pain point. And even prior to that, I'd even argue that a lot of clients themselves just don't have good data, or they don't have good data structures to start off with. You know, they don't have an AI issue, they have a data issue. And so the question is, do you assist them with that, or do you kind of suggest to them that, look, not every use case at this point, with given, you know, you don't have a certain data structure, may be feasible for AI. And I think that's another discussion. That everyone wants to integrate AI, but maybe some companies just don't have the data, you know, quality required to do that. So I think that's a huge pain point, because some companies just, their data is just all over the place, their APIs are all over the place. And is it your job as an AI consultant or developer to go fix their data? I'm not sure that's what we're there for.
So that's interesting. I kind of wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit, because I figured one of the interesting things about LLMs is the fact that the kind of like bar to improve like data quality is actually maybe a little bit lower, because you can just dump like plain text into the prompt. I figured, because and have the LLM figure out what's going on. What are some of the complexities you're seeing in terms of data quality, and then how would you recommend like some of your clients or customers actually go about like trying to clean their data to make it more suitable for LLM use cases?
Yeah, I mean, for example, you can have a client that comes and they've got, you know, a database of you know, valuable information that they currently have paying customers for, and they want to create a chatbot or, you know, interface for that database. The only problem is that their API schema is all over the place, right? Not only that, they're just not following the best practices of APIs and how to kind of store stuff in the database. And they expect the AI to be this magical solution, when in reality, you actually have fundamental software engineering issues, right? So you have, you know, those kind of use cases. You have people who want you know, to integrate AI with the documents, but you know, as Jason was saying, for example, maybe you discover, oh, half of these are OCR, right? Half of these are scanned documents. So how, you know, or they've got images, or they've got tables, you know, tables in the document they want you to extract. So I think yeah, it's those kind of requests where it's kind of like, it's a combination of data, traditional machine learning, data science, and then they want you to add the AI. I think people just kind of lump everything together and assume you're supposed to do all of that, you know.
I see. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, thanks for sharing and passing it to Dylan.
I definitely agree with what's been said so far, with the data. And I would say, in one word, to kind of summarize a lot of the pain points that I see in development is integration across different fronts. And this is something that both Jason and Mayo already touched on. Integrating with, I think we have a lot of new experimental technologies that have high potential coming out, but they're kind of separate from, like you said, the traditional machine learning or software engineering systems that we have. And we can see the potential of, okay, if we can integrate these things, we can make a really powerful system, but there's a little bit of a gap between the data that's at other companies, the API, the already coded software that's at the other companies, and then the functionality that the AI has or could have if it's correctly integrated with those. So I think, you know, things like the Llama Hub connectors, there's a service called psychic.dev that integrates with APIs. There's a lot of kind of almost microservice tools out there to create these, to bridge these gaps. But I 100% agree with Mayo and Jason when they're saying that there was kind of a wave of excitement of the magic of what these tools can do, but it really does take a lot of time to integrate the potential of these systems into already existing systems to make it actually functioning to a point where it can perform reliably to service the business's needs. Because you can load in all your documents into an AI and ask a question and it will retrieve something. But if you need it to retrieve a very specific set of information, then I think, you know, what we were getting at earlier with the kind of CSV or the database where you need a more structured approach, I think that's still a system that is being explored. And yeah, different. So for me, that kind of ties into another thing, which is the retrieval and the structure is a huge part of the integration. That's a challenge right now, for me at least. And to answer your question earlier, Jerry, on that, I've kind of been slowly, I've always been a JavaScript TypeScript person, but I'm slowly becoming more and more interested in Python because I see a lot of the structure and reliability there. And, you know, things like pandas, and there's some great Streamlit tools for at least entry-level CSV interactions. So I think, yeah, that the structure and integrating both with the business and also, like Mayo was saying, the data and creating the reliability and the structure of the data to parallel the AI systems to work with that is definitely a huge pain point. And then just one separate last point that I'll say is I think another challenge, and this is something I've been working on with Starmorph, is figuring out how to turn this challenge into like a strength of the company. And I think this is possible for especially small businesses and startups, is just how fast the landscape is changing and how many new tools are coming out. That, yeah, figuring out a strategy to be able to kind of iteratively integrate and add new repos and add new functionalities and be able to be really agile in this fast changing software development, I think is another challenge that a lot of people are running into.
Got it. So you're saying, like, just because of the rate at which tooling is coming out, people have to stay on top of everything, and then you have to figure out what's like the right abstraction layer to like use these different tools.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've probably, I'm just throwing out an estimate here, but working with, I don't know, I've probably spoken to maybe 200 different organizations and worked with 30 and around 30-ish, like closely, and just even doing the maintenance on, you know, that many software platforms when new models are coming out. You know, like the Vercel AI SDK came out a few months ago, and that's a thing. There's big updates coming out that sometimes it's easier to almost just switch to a new platform than to try to integrate all of the new updates coming into a current platform. So I think the maintenance and the ongoing development with the abundance of tooling, even just keeping up with all of the news, it can be, I hear so many people say like, it's a lot just keeping up. At some point you have to kind of check out and just focus on a few things because there's so much happening.
Right. Well, yeah, thanks for the thoughts. I want to touch on one thread that pretty much I think all three of you roughly touched on, with respect to something around, like, there's some aspect of data parsing, structured, and there's some aspect to that that's tricky, because it seems like if that data is really messy, or you're parsing it the wrong way, or you're structuring it the wrong way, and you're kind of maybe implementing the bad suboptimal retrieval algorithm on this, you're not going to be able to get the best results, especially if you're trying to build a LLM map. So maybe like really diving into that, what really kind of are the key complexities and parameters that you're seeing people struggle to figure out? When we talk about like data structuring, is it really about stuff like chunking? Is it really about stuff like adding metadata to it? And what parts really contribute the most to like suboptimal retrieval? And maybe we can start with you, Dylan, because I mean, you were talking about like data structuring, integrations, that type of stuff.
I think to be honest, I think Mayo definitely is the expert on this, and I think that I'm still learning, and that's a big pain point for me now, is having the structure and the ability to really fine tune the different parts of the system. But I think all of the parts of the system matter depending on the use case, whether that's, you know, the chunking, or I would say definitely the retrieval method is maybe one of the key ones in my experience. And just really having the reliability and figuring out what the exact use case is and how you need how you need the data to be that's going in, and then what you need the output to look like, and being able to reliably create that kind of, like we said earlier, personalized system for that use case. I think that something that's helped me is looking at it in a very modular sense and trying to have kind of portable modules for each part of the process that can be augmented for different projects, because maybe you have one use case where, you know, one LLM is just a little better suited to handle that, or you want to chunk things a certain way, or maybe you're doing more of a summarization and it can be a little more freestyle and creative, and you don't have to worry about the reliability. So I think the pieces that need to be augmented depends on the use case, and having them all available in different environments and in different, in different kind of portable modules that can be integrated quickly and flexibly is kind of how I've been approaching it.
Makes sense. Mayo, did you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, so you mean in terms of like the main culprits of the issues?
Yeah, basically. Just like, I mean, data, like, kind of really diving back into that thread of like data quality and also parsing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so just hallucination, for example. In my experience, all it takes is for one retrieve chunk to be like not accurate, and it kind of skews the results, right? I've seen the difference between the performance of the output. Let's say it's a 5 out of 10 result, and then we increase the threshold, similarity threshold, and because you increase the threshold, the retrieve chunks are more relevant. It's jumped to like a 9 out of 10. So what I've discovered is, even if the retrieve chunk is semantically similar, and even if it does contain some truth or something related to the question, if it just deviates a little bit, right, especially if you're using turbo, it can skew the results. It can actually make the output, trash. So there's definitely, I've noticed that, and this was a pain point. I've had a lot of developers reach out to me about, a framework like LangChain, because you have to almost strip it down all the way, then you can tweak these variables, because out of the box it's just doing the retrieval for you, and you don't realize when you start debugging that actually the cause of the issue you're having is that the relationship to the vector and the threshold that you've set to generate the context. In terms of latency, I'm seeing that if you, there's all kinds of weird things with different vectors, and this is another issue. Like every vector store seems to have their own quirks, like in terms of, what makes it perform well, what doesn't make it, So for example, with Pinecone, if you have metadata that's not like null, you do that, you might not realize that's what's happening under the hood, but you might say link LlamaIndex to Pinecone, you've got metadata that's null, it's going to break your application, right? I've had that experience before. It took me 3 days to figure out that was the cause. Another issue is if you have too much metadata attached to the embedding itself, it can slow your retrieval system by another 30 seconds, right? So this is like the difference between the results coming in immediately and now maybe your metadata, because you're trying to be very granular. I know LlamaIndex has tons of tools for kind of the nodes and kind of filtering, and so if you attach too much metadata to your embeddings, that can also slow down retrieval significantly. So you've got that issue with latency as well. I mean, we can talk about all the other causes of it, but in my experience, that's what I've seen so far.
Did you say 30 seconds? If you add a bunch of metadata, it can like slow down retrieval by that much. That's actually a surprising number.
Yeah. There's one of the projects we worked on recently, and that was what happened. It's especially with something out of the box like Superbase's PG vector, or things that are not dedicated vector stores, you do run into slower retrieval times that way.
Gotcha. Cool. Jason, did you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, you mean like yeah? So probably two things. One is that you mentioned for data structure problem specifically. One is like a few problems I found with it's just for the normal documentation. There are list of parameters you need to really or levers you need to pull, like the chunking size, stuff like that, or the data storage you choose also have the impact on the actual results, and it's very hard to. So far, I haven't found best practice, to be honest. Every time, just like start from something and then do like iterate this through multiple times, and so that's kind of just for simple one. But the other part is that in terms of metadata, when I was helping with another clients who want to build some internal knowledge base, because for the one topic, they might have iterated version of the truth, like one project might iterate multiple times. So during retrieval, they even got like contradicted data. So I have to add metadata into like the date of when this blog or article was added, so that large language model has more kind of context. But things like that is that thing is also not useful for many other scenarios that they don't need that metadata, and they just add on context limits for unnecessarily. So I haven't figured out a very smart way to handle this type of situation, to decide when to pull those metadata in versus not. And apart from that, I think we already talked about like all those PDF and CSV file. How do we get the just accurate data out properly? Yeah, so that's kind of data structure part. But in terms of the actual retrieval, it's just different questions that user ask in terms of the knowledge retrieval system. They require different methods. So how can we? Yeah, apart from using agent, so far I haven't figured out a really smart way that is fast, but also can know whether the question need to be break down properly or choose the right method to use. And the main part is also just like there's so many levers to pull. It's very hard to know what's a specific thing that need to be fixed, especially when things goes wrong. I remember there was one time I spent a lot of time to figure out whether my prompt has problem, but only when I actually look at the result it returned, I realized probably there's some setup wrong initially. That all the score for the result is very similar. So that's the time I realized, oh, it's actually not setting up properly at the beginning. So yeah, there are a lot of area can go wrong. It's very hard to say which part it is.
So it seems like a lot. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, one major issue popped up in my head I completely forgot to mention was a lot of use cases I'm seeing are popping up recently are kind of very time related. So for example, you can have someone, it's not static. So basically the data is constantly being updated and so the challenge is how do you continuously update your vector store or update whatever machine learning or AI system you've put up in place so that it's in sync with the application you've built for the client. So I'd say the constant updating and keeping up with the data changes is another major pain point.
Yeah, no, that's a great pain point. We've heard that from some users too. It's definitely very much kind of like a systems engineering thing, but very much like a core part of making these like production ready. Now, yeah, thanks for your guys' thought. This is great, and it seems like the high level some high level themes is a lot of this stuff is pretty tricky, and a lot of this is pretty use case specific, and so we're kind of like figuring out like tips and tricks for more specific use cases. Maybe kind of like since we're on the space of also helping to educate others on maybe what are some like good development practices to follow and maybe solutions and tools to look for to try to improve these types of systems and try to solve some of these pain points. What maybe are some kind of either general practices or tools that like an AI engineer or skills that an AI engineer should have within like their toolkit or skill set in order to start tackling some of these issues? For instance, like should they, for instance, think about how to properly evaluate and experiment with things? Should they think about how to like really, trace through like prompts and log like the inputs, outputs of the LLM? Should they maybe have some like benchmarks set up so they can measure metrics whenever they try to do a little bit of prompt engineering or tune the retrieval algorithm? Yeah, that type of stuff. And this is something that I've been kind of thinking about as like general practices as well. And maybe we could start with Jason.
Yeah. So in terms of the practice, one thing I found that there are a few things. Probably one is from the generation, another is from retrieval. From generation part, it's just always making sure you actually have some practice adding into the prompt, making sure like very specific instruction only based on this content. If no, just return no random results so that you actually know when things go wrong. And on the other side, just ability to log and have the observability is a very good start to debug. Because at the moment, yeah, if you have, ideally you want a way to have observe the whole RAG pipeline, so you know where things actually went wrong, from chunking to retrieval to the actual results. And there are a few tools like Landsmith, they can support you to do things like that. Yeah, so that's the other two things I would say on top of my mind.
Sweet. Dylan, do you have thoughts?
I would say that I think observability is definitely a huge thing. I'm a big fan of learning by doing. So I think that just deploying an LLM app and setting the system prompt and just getting something going and modifying, just toying with it, and really learning just by seeing the results is a really powerful way to experiment with modulating these systems. And while you're doing that too, while you have the systems available, then you can get into the observability. Some tools that I've used that are really helpful. One is called helicone.ai that gives you some background info on what's happening behind the scenes. You can see what chunk is being retrieved from the vector store and brought into context. And that can really help understand what's happening behind the scenes. Another tool is highlight.io. Axiom and Sentry are all logging tools for JavaScript web applications. And just really getting as much visibility into what's happening as possible, I think is critical for evaluation. I have had an engineer help in the past, kind of a prompt engineer, evaluation focused person to, we can save a lot of the question answer responses to evaluate them, and also those can be used for fine-tuning, things like that as well. So I would say, yeah, diving in and like we've been saying, kind of experimenting with all of the different pieces, whether that's chunking, the metadata structure, the retrieval, the vector store, the LLM, all of the pieces I think are great to experiment with, and kind of jumping in can get you a good part of the way. And then it is really helpful also to have someone who has that formal machine learning experience and is going to build that structure to create a more advanced and reliable system to kind of bridge the gap from where just jumping in and experimenting might get to actually getting to a production ready application. So I would say definitely just playing under the hood of these systems and collecting as much information as you can to get a more educated, get the data to understand what needs to be augmented to get the best result possible.
Yeah, and that's a nice set of tools that you mentioned, like Helicone, Sentry, and Mayo, passing it to you.
Yeah, you guys basically nailed it. I'll just add to that through my experience, I've just quickly learned that the first thing that I want to know quickly is what exactly is the client looking for in terms of outcomes, right? Because I can do all this fancy stuff and then find out at the end that the results I think look good is not what they think looks good. So the benchmark for me is crucial. Jerry, I think you mentioned that already. What if that looks like could be a simple CSV of sample questions and answers, and then potential retrieved sources that the client says, hey, this is what a perfect retrieval would look like to us. And if they can give us 5, 10, 15, the more they can give us, the better, then we have a benchmark to start with. And if, as a matter of fact, my dream situation would be just to take that CSV and then some way to automate the configuration of the RAG system. So it's like, oh, done. Now all of a sudden they ask the question and the answer is exactly what they want. But so far that's not, we're not there yet, software wise. But yeah, the benchmarking for me is crucial, because then that makes sure everyone's on the same page. This is what you said you want as a question. This is the answer to a satisfactory answer to the question. And here are the retrieved source documents that you're happy with. But yeah, other than that, in terms of techniques, like I said, playing around with the threshold of similarity search, and all the other stuff you've all mentioned. Playing around with different vectors. Maybe you go for hybrid search instead of just semantic search, or do you use keyword search? And then Jerry, I know you put out some interesting stuff recently about fine tuning plus RAG. So I haven't played out with that, but I'd be interested to see how that plays out too.
Sweet. We're talking about like some of the benchmarks. How do you create a benchmark? Do you recommend your clients just like manually do it? Like they just go in and eyeball a bunch of stuff, like create like eyeball 100 rows of data. Yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah, I know there's ways you can automate this with AI, right? But yeah. I'm not leaving anything to chance, right? I want them to put it together. So there's no one's going to complain in the end and say, hey, this is not what we wanted. So yeah, we definitely there's a lot of manual curation in the start. And then once that's done, we just get to work. So that's what worked. But I'm open to hearing successful automated benchmark creation.
Jason, Dylan, have you guys created benchmarks or have like manual or automated ways of doing that?
Maybe I can go first on that. I most of the time I actually like Mayo. I don't see the need for those SMB clients to actually set up very proper benchmark yet. But there are times I do set up a list of example question. Because for a few clients, I realized when I change maybe the prompt or the pipeline, it worked for this question, but for other question it didn't work again. So I normally for those type of situation, I would get a list of those database of question and answers, and then just run that for all those 10 or 20 questions to see. It's not a huge amount, but I found just enough.
Gotcha.
I would say that I think this is where some of my design background comes in, that I like to work very collaboratively. So a lot of the time we'll set up the client with a helicone, and it's kind of an ongoing process of Mayo said it earlier, it ends up becoming my responsibility a lot of the time to figure out, what data do we need in the first place, and working with the data before even getting into the AI, just preparing all of the data. I mean, sometimes that takes months to get all the data ready, to be honest. And so I like to kind of build in parallel with the client. And so setting them up with a helicone where they can kind of help me do the evaluation. I guess I use a reinforcement learning human feedback mechanism to do evaluation. But on more kind of software levels of that, yeah, typically for all the chatbots I create, I'm storing the question and answer responses in multiple databases. So we have those available to import into different tools for doing evaluation. There's some spreadsheets that I've used that are kind of pre-set up where you can just input the row pairs and then get an idea of if that's what you're looking for. And then I have one of my good friends is really deep into just the details of prompt engineering and stuff. So sometimes I'll pass him that and he'll help me explore some more advanced prompting, chain of thought and tree of thought systems and things like that to kind of experiment with what outputs we can get from the LLMs. But yeah, I would say definitely logging and having that, like you said, a CSV of all of the outputs. And I think having the output that you want to get to is a great idea. I love what you said about, maybe you could make an agentic pipeline to start to automate the modulating of these systems to create different outputs depending on like what you're looking for. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I would say that's my answer.
Great, thanks for your thoughts. As we enter into last few minutes of the webinar, I figured I'd ask like one last question, and maybe we have time for one ish audience questions. What's kind of like maybe the top of mind on your wish list for the future in tooling, I guess LLM developments, that type of stuff. Let me start with Mayo.
Well, I mean, Jerry, if I say it here, there could be some people listening going to steal your ideas. So how much do you want me to say behind closed doors, and how much?
Well, I mean,
anyway,
how much of our secret sauce did I leak to you?
Yeah, we've got secrets. Man, just a lot of the stuff I said. It's just there's so much like guesswork we're still doing in terms of, you've got new prospective use case, and then it's like you try something you tried before, it doesn't work as well, and now you're trying to tweak all these variables, and it's just it's a lot of work. It's just a lot of guesswork, and then you've got new models coming out all the time. Even the same models you used before, they change their behavior with the prompts as well, right? So it's just, I think the dream situation would be not just observability is cool. It's good. It's like Google Analytics, right? But that's not going to help you build a website that's really good with SEO, right? You still need the application. So for me, the dream situation would be tooling that not only allows me to observe, like for debugging, but also provides automated testing or an automated way to optimize the different variables required for the outcome. So if a client provides a benchmark of questions and answers, it would be amazing if I could just plug it in somewhere and get the optimal prompt, the optimal RAG configurations, and then that's it. I'm done. I don't need to spend months tweaking and find the optimal prompt and find the optimal retrieval system. So I think that would be the dream situation, is tooling that just automates based on what the person's desired outcome is, what are the optimal configurations and even the optimal components. Because Jerry, as much as I love your stuff, man, every time you post, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, another idea, another way of doing this, right? It just doesn't end. It's just new ways at the time. It's easy to fall behind. So there's so many components, there's so many ideas, and how can we find the optimal approach for a given use case would be amazing. That would be the dream situation.
Makes sense. Jason.
Yeah, so I actually the one you mentioned, I feel quite excited when I think about it. It's almost like a way to fine-tune the RAG system by providing the final output. But I was also thinking about something similar, like if the part I'm actually interested about the evaluation system is if we imagine we have a large language model can do the evaluation very well, and then have another agent can figure out based on the results, figure out the optimization for the final output. Then I think that system can be really interesting. It just self-iterate to the most optimal configuration. So that's one thing I think can be really good. But short term, if someone can just really handle the data loading, I would be really, really appreciated. Like handle all those PDF, all those legacy documents to just clean up automatically. That would be really cool. But on the other hand, like I almost feel like if there's one kind of hub or place where I can see how other people are setting up this whole RAG pipeline, so I can watch and learn as well. That would be super useful, because at the moment, my main source of the learning is also your tweets as well. I sometimes see you post something and then I can look into this new tactic, but it's also very hard to see the full picture about what's the best practice for that tactic as well.
100%. Dylan.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what was just said. And I would say I think naturally that, this is a new booming ecosystem of tools that we just need, like kind of we were saying earlier on in this call, the maturity of these systems bridging the gap to the already existing software industry. And So I would say the maturity of these tools integrating with existing software. And then also I think I'd like to see modularity and portability, so we can get to, you know, the point that we're discussing where we can automate and quickly assemble a wide variety of these systems depending on the needs that we for that project. So yeah, I think being able to integrate everything in a way where it's going to be stable and reliable, and you can fine tune each part of the system easily and know that, okay, I don't need to, this isn't going to break my development environment. This is still going to work in a few months. And I know that if I want to get this kind of structured output, I need to tweak this module of the system. If I want to get, you know, this kind of RAG system, I need to use this vector store, and just having a kind of bird's eye view all within one mature ecosystem that, yeah, can be easily integrated with already existing things. It's kind of an abstract answer, but I think the tools are all out. There's so many amazing tools and potential out there now. And I think we just need some time as like a development community to take the time to kind of weave them together. And once we bridge the gap with everything that's out there, we're going to have some amazing stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks for your thoughts. All right. Last question. I think this is the audience question, but I figured just to wrap it up, we'll make it 10 seconds for each person. I think basically the gist of the question is, are we at the peak of inflated expectations in AI? And I figured it would just be something like, are LLMs, you know, overhyped, underhyped right now? What's your take? Starting with Dylan.
Oh, that's a hot
10
topic,
seconds.
right?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Okay. I would say that I think there is a wave of excitement that sort of ended with the magic in the first few months. And I think we're maybe gearing up for a more long-term, but more meaningful integration of the real utility of these tools. So I think, yeah, it's definitely critical long-term in terms of hype. It might be going up and down. I'm not sure.
All right, Jason.
I think now is the right amount of hype. It's like compared with a few months ago, people's expectation is here, but what we can do is now here. But after a few experiments, like people's expectation under like more aligned to the reality. So I feel like it's the right amount, to be honest.
Sweet. Mayo.
Yeah, no, the hype's definitely died out. I still think expectations are, I wouldn't say they're high, I'll just say they're unrealistic. And that's just lack of knowledge, right? So I think as an industry, we need to do a better job now of speaking to the language of the vast majority of users, you know, talking more in business lingo, just the language they understand, so that they don't expect us to do, they don't expect AI to do a lot of things that it's not designed to do. So.
Sweet. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mayo, Jason, and Dylan, for joining this webinar today. I think we had a great discussion, and there were just a lot of very interesting points being raised, everything from the pain points to the need for, you know, kind of like standardization of best practices to figure out like best solutions for building RAG agents, all these types of things. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. And for the audience, hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll have the recording up on YouTube in a day or two. All right, thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.